Quick overview of the Phase 1 Project 2 the image color palette studies. When you download the zipped file, which is included in the assignment, you'll see this show up wherever you save it to. As you probably know, you'll just double click on that and it'll open up to the folder here, which will contain a few things for you here. It'll contain this IDML file. It's a version saved to where if you don't have the most the version that's at least as recent as mine, which is not the most recent, I haven't updated it. Then if you have an earlier version, you'll be able to work in that IDML file without issue. Okay. If you don't need to worry about that because you have an even more current version updated than I do, then you could seriously just go in here and chuck it. Okay. So if you don't need it. PDF was included. That's really just for your reference. It's not really for you to work in or anything. It's just so you know, like, okay, these are all the pages you should have in your document. Okay, I'll talk more about these last couple pages, which we didn't get to in class. Okay, the main file is here. You're going to see a links folder. Those are just the placeholder images that I've popped in there. And because we do have a little section down here with a description, you probably have Helvetica. It did package Helvetica for you as well. The nice thing here is it has the light and black versions. So if you don't have those, there you go. So that's just so you don't have any font issues. But again, you shouldn't because it's pretty ubiquitous. Okay, that typeface. If it's not the exact version of Helvetica that's in the file, if you have another one and you want to use that, that's fine. Otherwise, you can upload these fonts into your system. Okay. So I have the file already open. That's what you see here. Don't worry about that. You won't have that. That's just because the file's already open. And as we looked at today, you're taking your two favorite images from each of the point, line, plane, texture, and letter form photos that you did back way back in Project 1. Okay. And you're going to take those and basically replace them into this space here. And this cropped, square, and then you're going to pull colors from there to create a palette that you feel is, I mean, again, you can pull so many different possible colors out of here, and even though the palette will feel roughly the same, the variations will, they might have an effect if you're trying to go for a particular feel. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to pull colors from there using the eyedropper tool. And then you're going to create a palette, and then you're going to little descriptors here that connect to the overall color palette. Okay. Now, when you're working on your descriptors here, base it on this here versus the photo. Okay, that's the idea. And if there's any, ask yourself, like I was saying, is there a disconnect between what I'm describing here and the image itself? If so, why? And if it actually doesn't, if there isn't a disconnect and it feels totally connected, why is that? Okay, I'm not asking you to write that down. I just want you to be thinking about that as we kind of develop more of a sensitivity to colors, especially as they connect to each other and relate to each other in a palette of sorts. Okay, so again, to do this, there are a few examples in here. We did this one, a couple of them in class. I'll just show you again here. These are just your sort of neutral template versions here. If I click on the, actually the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on, using my black arrow, I'm going to click on the box that holds the image, and I'm going to hit Command D as in dog, and I'm going to go to my folder wherever your images are, and I'm going to pick an image from there that works. Again, maybe it was one of my favorite images. These are just images that were part of the assignment. Okay, as you can see, that one comes in a little smaller. So now, if I don't want to increase the size of the box, I want the box to stay the same size, but I do want to increase this image to fit. So I'm using the white arrow, and using the white arrow, I click on the image, and then I can either click and drag to scale it up. If I do, I hold Command and Shift in InDesign to scale that up. Okay. And I look up here and I see I'm at about 96% of full size. So I'm fine. I'm not going to have it look terrible and pixelated. If that starts to get into like, 150, 120, etc. percent. These are basically the percentages of the original size. Then I'm going to get images that look pretty bad. Okay, but get it in there to where there's a good crop that you like, something that feels right, and it sits in the space nicely for you. Okay, I'd probably work on this a little more. Getting these edges together, I might increase the size a little bit and see what that does for me. But all the time I'm using the white arrow to move just the image around and not the box. Okay. If I want to move the box around, which I mean, if I was going to want to move the box around, I would actually click on the black arrow. You're not going to want to do that. Okay. So let's say I have my image where I want it. I'm going to go down here to my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to select. For me, I'm going to start with the lightest color. These keys are pretty predominant here, and they are kind of a pale white, kind of grayish color. You can see as soon as I click on it, the eyedropper changes directions, and if I click on this square, it'll apply that color, which especially on the video might be hard to see. It's very pale there. If I hold Option, then it goes back to you can see it swing the other way, and I can use it again to pick up a color. I might go a little bit darker on the white and try putting it back on here again. Maybe that's a better starting point for me. Can I go maybe even a little darker gray here? This is probably that's not a dominant color in there, this sort of gray. So I'm going to settle for this gray that for me connects to the white and the string elements back here, that grayish color going on there. And then for me, the next most prevalent color that's from lighter to dark, I could even get into this red here and see what that does. Okay, that'll work. I can start to see some of this steel blue kind of grayish color going on. Maybe that goes there. The Corona, the logo for the typewriter is definitely a part of this mix. I'm gonna put that there, and then I'm gonna go maybe to this darker corner again, holding Option. I'm gonna just click on Option and assign that color there, which is pretty much close to black. And then I have to look at that and decide, okay, do I feel that's pretty indicative of the image overall color palette? This I still feel like maybe seems a little dark. So I'm going to go back to my eyedropper. I might go for a lighter version of that. I want to have some variety between what's already in there. I like that a little bit better. Okay, so then I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to describe, in several words, what I feel this feels like. Okay, and as you see from previous examples, you'll cool, breeze, sea, soil, earth, rust, bark, those types of things. Okay, so feelings and objects or things. Okay, so moods, you can use descriptive, you can use adjectives, you can use nouns, whatever. A combination I think is a good call, and you're going to just make sure that you do that for each of them after you get your image placed and your palette established. Okay, so that's that. Once you do that, you're going to get all 10 images done. So again, you're going to have 2 favorite images from the 5 point line plane textured letter form, and you'll do all 10 of those images. You'll create your palettes, and you'll do all of your descriptions, and then you're going to take your favorite palette, okay, and you're going to take that down. If you move down here, if you look in your pages palette, you can do it that way. That you can scroll. You have 14 pages here, okay. On page 11, so 1 through 10 are all your photos with your palettes. On page 11, you're going to come in here, and you're going to take your favorite palette, and simply, if you needed to, say this is your favorite palette, you select them all, Command C, and then Command V, and then just overlay them on top of here. Okay, and then you're going to just, whatever your palette is, you'll have that there. And using that palette, you will now start to select the colors. You'll double click on your color, your fill here, which is again just like in Illustrator. You double click on that. First thing you do, it'll default to, but typically it'll default, it'll be here is selecting this R field. Put your cursor in one of the RGB fields and hit Add RGB Swatch. Okay, I've already done that, so I'm not going to do that again. I'll show you the swatch palette in a second. And then do the same thing, click in your CMYK, hit Add CMYK Swatch, and then click here in your hex code, which again, this is just for screen color for mixes. So we can apply them, and we can all, like if I want this particular color and you're working on a project related to something and we're collaborating digitally, you're going to ask me, hey, what is the hex code for that if we're doing like a web project or something? And I would give you that number, and you could assign that color without any sort of guesswork. Because a lot of people overly rely on the color picker and their eye, and that's fine to a degree, but when it comes to the specific colors, you want to have this hex code for screens, okay? You're going to copy, and first thing I do is like copy that. I would hit OK. And I would copy that hex code and paste it right in here, okay? Because that's where you're going to put the hex code. All right. And then now that you added, if you go to your swatches palette, which is just under Window, Color, Swatches, okay, if it's not already in your field here, you can see I've already added all of these colors here. But if I do this one by one, I know, okay, I can see, well, I don't want to do that. I don't have anything selected there. My RGB palette here is 248, 161, 116. So I pop those values in there. For my CMYK, I see that it's 0, 44, 56, and 0. So I put that there. Now, these Pantone colors here are just placements that I've already created. Okay, so obviously this will be unrelated to yours, possibly, depending on your palette. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go and you're going to get onto the Pantone website. Okay, which is just Pantone.com. In fact, let me show you. If you go to Pantone.com, and then you'll see a whole bunch of stuff here. Okay, so get that out of the way. Let's hit this. There's a whole section on. You can scroll through the site for one thing. It's definitely worth checking out because this is all stuff that's related to things you're going to be concerned about as a designer. If it doesn't show up at the top, you can click here at the bottom to find the Pantone color, and you'll get this screen here. You can make the chip size whatever color you want. I'm going to make them large so I can see them a little better. And then I'm going to close this up a little bit so I can have both of my both the site and my file here kind of in the same zone. Okay. If you hit Tab when you're in InDesign or in Illustrator, as you may know, it'll get rid of all of your items, and you can hit Tab and they'll come back. So I'm going to then scroll through here and start to get a sense of which color works for my palette. What's the closest match? It won't be exact. Now I was asked, can I use like an RGB to Pantone converter? You can try that, but I have to tell you that they're often not very accurate, at least the ones I've come across online. If Pantone has one in particular and that works, that's probably the best bet. Go for it. I don't use it. I don't typically need to use it. So so I can see right away if I'm looking at my palette. One of the reasons to look through this is I just want you to get a sense of how all these colors connect and relate to each other and how they're listed throughout the system. As you can see, it's massive, right? So if I start here, if you're on the actual site and you start to roll over, it'll kind of give you a sense of what the colors are. Right away, this is one that I thought was pretty close. So now if I click on that chip for Pantone, it'll open a new tab. So just be aware it's going to open a new tab every time you click on the color. It will then show me the values here. Okay. And if I look at my RGB values, 254, 173, 119, that's pretty close. I mean, that's pretty close to what we have in our, just using our color picker, okay? And then you'll see the CMYK values also pretty close, 0, 35, 54, 0. That's close enough for me. I'm gonna call it Pantone 7410C. Now, one thing to be aware of is when you are, it'll default to the Formula Guide coded. This means for coded paper stock. Even though we're using screen, I'm not worried about it. Just let it default to the Formula Guide coded, and select colors from that palette. As you see, there are different versions. The uncoded for uncoded papers, color bridge, extended gamut. So like, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. You get into metallics and pastels, things that we're not worried about. Let it default to Formula Guide coded, and that's the one we're going to use. Okay. And so I'll do that for all my colors. I'll set up my, I'll put my Pantone in there. And then what I'll do is when I'm in my file, get my tabs back here. In fact, some of you might want to use Bridge so you can go through different applications more readily. I typically don't do it, but I probably should. Now what you can do is when you go to color, your color palette, okay, which is just under Window, Color, and then Color. You can select here, or what you could do is actually, let's go to your swatches palette, and let's go to create a new color swatch, or new color swatch up here. And it's going to give you this window, okay? And color type, you're going to actually put spot, because a spot color, the difference between a spot and process is a CMYK mix, spot color is a Pantone formula mix, okay? So I'm going to make that a spot color. I'm going to scroll down here to my Pantone Solid Coated, because that's what we're working with. And I'm going to put in 7410 Coated. And I'm going to click on that. I'm going to hit Add, and you'll see that I already have it in there, so I'm not going to do it. But so then you'll add that to your swatches palette. So your swatches palette for each of these colors here will have essentially 3 colors: your CMYK, your RGB, and your Pantone. Okay, and then make sure you put, to replace this chip with your color of the actual Pantone swatch color. List the Pantone number there, and that's all you need to do for that page. Okay, the last 3 pages are going to be real examples of products or brands, and make it graphic design, branding, or this is essentially a brand identity applied to interiors for a brewing company. A little bit more of a muted version of the palette, this sort of earth, kind of warmer tones, and rich browns, and kind of pale grays, and steel grays, and that kind of thing. And I'm just going to put down what the client, or what the example is. This is Scorched Earth Brewing Identity and Interiors. I'm going to do that again. For another one, I have 3. So color palette example 2, and I'll list that, and then color palette example 3. So depending on the images you find, and again, all you're going to do this, you're going to, for example, you might go to a site like Designspiration, and I searched earth tones, okay, and it'll give you some options here, and you can see, all the different colors. You can search by colors. If people have saved palettes, you'll see saved palette examples with other products that are similar to the palette that you're working with. You're going to have to decide what your best search criteria is, and Designspiration is one option of a site that has pretty extensive examples for many different types of design projects, and color is a part of it as well, which is helpful. But you're essentially going to go through and get the closest possible match, okay? And you're going to list those, okay? So these are the ones I selected, these 3, okay? And then as part of your submission, you're going to list for each of your example why that palette worked for that particular project, okay? So just a brief, few sentences essentially telling me why that palette might be applied to Scorched Earth Brewing and their identity, or Murray's hairdressing pomade, or Stumptown chocolates. 3 pretty disparate products or brands or services, but all with a palette that's at least somewhat similar, okay? And that's that. I'll list everything out for you in the assignment as well. And if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll talk next session. Thanks.